Close your eyes if you wish, and let your mind drift to the gritty, gaslit streets of 1920s New York. A city pulsing with jazz, ambition, and hidden horrors. The air carries the scent of damp pavement, roasted chestnuts from street carts, and the faint tang of illicit whiskey. It's a time of flappers and speakeasies, but also of shadows where trust could lead to terror. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It motivates me to make more content like these for you. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from today and what time it is for you. I love hearing of how many places are people joining us from. Tonight, we'll step into the world of Albert Fish, a man whose depravity shocked a nation, and imagine the chilling reality of living near him. We'll trace his gruesome crimes, explore the unsolved mysteries tied to his era, and uncover the glittering underworld of Prohibition's bootleggers. This journey is one of quiet dread and fascination, told with a gentle cadence to guide you toward rest. Settle in, breathe deeply, and let the rhythm of New York's past carry you softly forward. Our story begins in a Brooklyn tenement, where a neighbor's unsettling presence casts a long shadow. Picture yourself in 1928, living in a cramped tenement on Brooklyn's East 52nd Street, where the clatter of streetcars and the shouts of children playing stickball fill the air. It's a working-class neighborhood, its brick buildings stained with soot, the streets smelling of coal smoke and boiled cabbage from open windows. You're a young adult, perhaps a clerk or seamstress, scraping by on $15 a week, your life a quiet struggle to pay rent and buy groceries. The city is alive with the energy of the roaring 20s jaws, spills from nearby dance halls, and newspapers buzz with stories of Babe Ruth's home runs and prohibition raids. But in your building, there's a man who unsettles you. Albert Fish, frail, gray-haired figure with a soft voice and eyes that seem to linger too long. His presence is like a cold draft, and living near him feels like walking a tightrope over a void. Fish rents a room down the hall, a nondescript man in his late 50s. Often seen in a worn suit, carrying a painter's toolkit or a sack of groceries, he's polite, almost grandfatherly, offering candies to the neighborhood children, or chatting with mothers about the weather. But something about him chills you. His smile is too wide, his gaze too piercing, as if he's studying you, peeling back your thoughts. You notice how he lingers near the children playing hopscotch on the sidewalk, his hands twitching slightly as he watches. Parents whisper about him, how he tells strange stories of his travels, how he's always alone, how his room smells faintly of paint thinner and something sour, like spoiled milk. You try to dismiss it as gossip, but the unease grows, like a knot tightening in your chest. Your days are filled with routine. You rise early, the city waking with the screech of milk wagons and the clink of bottles on stoops. You work long hours typing invoices in a smoky office or stitching shirts in a sweatshop. Your fingers sore. Your wages barely covering the $8 monthly rent for your one-room apartment. Turning home, you pass Fish in the hallway, his soft good evening sending a shiver down your spine. He might ask you to run an errand, deliver a letter to a nearby address, or fetch a package from a pharmacy. The tasks seem innocent, but the addresses are odd, often boarding houses or empty lots. And the packages are heavy, wrapped in butcher paper that leaves a greasy stain on your hands. You begin to avoid him, taking the stairs 2 at a time to reach your room. The neighborhood buzzes with rumors of missing children. Boy from a nearby street, 8 years old, vanished after school last month, his cap found in an alley. A girl, 10, didn't come home after buying candy at the corner store. The Brooklyn Eagle prints brief stories, but the police seem overwhelmed. They're focused on bootlegging raids rather than missing kids. Parents keep their children closer now, their laughter quieter, their games confined to courtyards. You overhear mothers talking in the laundry room, their voices low. That Fish, he was seen near the school again. You start locking your door at night, though the flimsy bolt feels like no protection. The city's noise horns, shouts. The rumble of the elevated train canteen drown out the fear that Fish knows more than he lets on. His interactions grow stranger. One day, he hands you a letter to mail, his fingers brushing yours, cold as marble. The envelope is addressed to a family in Manhattan, the handwriting shaky but precise. You notice a faint red stain on the corner, like ink or something worse. Another time, he asks you to watch his room while he's out, claiming he's expecting a delivery. You refuse, your voice trembling, and his smile falters, his eyes narrowing for a moment before he laughs it off. At night, you hear sounds from his room's soft thumps, the creak of floorboards, a low murmur like someone praying. The air in the tenement carries a faint chemical smell, sharp and biting, that seems to come from his door. You wonder what he does in there, alone with his tools and his secrets. Living near Fish is a constant strain, a quiet battle to trust your instincts against his disarming demeanor. You eat simple meals: bread, cheese, a tin of sardines in your room. The clink of your fork, a small anchor against the dread. You avoid the alley behind the building, where shadows pool under flickering gas lamps. The city's vibrancy feels distant. Your world narrows to the tenement, its walls closing in. You begin to notice patterns: Fish, leaving at odd hours, turning with his clothes rumpled, his hands stained with paint or dirt. Children stop playing near him, their parents' warnings sinking in. You wonder if you should move, but rent elsewhere is steeper, and jobs are scarce. The fear of confronting him, of becoming a target, keeps you silent. Life in Fish's world is a dance with suspicion, where every glance feels like a threat, every kindness a lure. Tss. The city's pulse jazz, streetcars. The chatter of neighbors offers no comfort when you live in the shadow of a man whose darkness is only beginning to surface. You wouldn't last a day, not because of violence, but because the weight of his presence would unravel you, thread by thread. This was the chilling reality of living near Albert Fish, a man whose quiet demeanor hid a monster. But who was he, this figure who haunted New York's streets? Let's step back and trace the arc of his life, a story of depravity that shocked a nation. Imagine yourself now as a quiet observer, standing in the shadows of 1920s New York, watching a man whose unassuming appearance masked a darkness that would horrify a nation. Albert Fish, known to neighbors as a soft-spoken painter or handyman, was a figure of chilling contradictions, a frail, gray-haired man whose depravity knew no bounds. Born Hamilton Howard Fish in 1870 in Washington, D.C., his life was a descent into a nightmare that unfolded across decades, culminating in crimes that shocked even a city hardened by Prohibition's violence. Let's trace his path, step by careful step, through a world where innocence was his prey and cruelty his obsession, told with a steady cadence to keep you anchored as you drift toward rest. Fish's early years were marked by loss and instability. Picture a small house in Washington, the air heavy with the scent of coal fires and damp wool, where young Hamilton grew up in a family strained by poverty. His father died when he was 5, and his mother, unable to cope, placed him in St. John's orphanage. There the air smelled of mildew and boiled oats. Discipline was harsh. Whippings were common. A practice Fish later claimed awakened a twisted fascination with pain. By his teens, he was back with his mother, but the seeds of his darkness were sown. He began stealing, forging checks and wandering the streets, his boyish face disarming suspicion. In 1890, at 20, he moved to New York City, where the clatter of horse-drawn cabs and the glow of gas lamps welcomed a young man eager to reinvent himself. Fish blended into the city's underbelly, working odd jobs: painter, carpenter, janitor, his hands calloused, his clothes patched but neat. Picture him in a Brooklyn tenement, his room sparse, the air tinged with paint thinner, and the faint must of old books. He married in 1898, raising 6 children, but his home life was a facade. Behind his quiet demeanor, Fish harbored sadistic urges, fueled by religious delusions and a fixation on suffering. He frequented brothels, not for pleasure, but to indulge in acts of self-harm, paying others to whip him or burning himself with needles. His children later recalled his strange habits, staring at the ceiling for hours, muttering prayers, or leaving home for days without explanation. The New York Times in 1935 quoted his daughter describing him as a man who seemed to live in his own world. By the 1910s, Fish's crimes escalated. He began targeting children, mostly boys and girls from poor neighborhoods, where disappearances drew little attention. Picture a Lower East Side alley, its cobblestones slick with rain, where Fish might approach a child with a gentle smile, offering candy or a coin to run an errand. His methods were calculated, luring victims to abandoned buildings or rented rooms, where his acts of violence were unspeakable. He avoided graphic confessions, but court records later revealed he took pleasure in their suffering, his crimes driven by a mix of sadism and warped spirituality. He claimed divine voices guided him, a delusion that justified his horrors. The Brooklyn Eagle reported in 1928 on missing children in neighborhoods Fish frequented, though few suspected the quiet old man. His most infamous crime was the 1928 kidnapping of Grace Budd, a 10-year-old girl from Manhattan. Picture a modest apartment, its walls papered in faded florals where Fish, posing as a kindly employer named Frank Howard, visited the Budd family. He offered a job to Grace's brother, but his eyes lingered on Grace, her laughter bright as she played. Days later, he returned, convincing her parents to let her attend a fictional birthday party. Fish led her away, her small hand in his, never to return. The family's grief filled their tenement, the air heavy with despair as police searches yielded nothing. Fish later sent a letter to the Budds intercepted by police, describing her fate in veiled terms enough to confirm her death but sparing the worst details. The New York Daily News in 1934 called it a letter from hell, its cold precision chilling readers. Fish's crimes spanned decades, with victims across New York, possibly beyond. He claimed dozens, though only a few were confirmed. Billy Gaffney, 4, vanished in 1927. Francis McDonnell, 8, in 1924. And Grace Budd, police records as cited in the New York Times, linked him to at least 15 disappearances, but the true number may be higher, as many cases went unreported in the city's poorest corners. His methods varied: strangulation, dismemberment, or worse. But he disposed of evidence with care, often in rivers or vacant lots. The Hudson River, its waters dark and sluggish, swallowed secrets, while empty buildings smelled of dust and decay, hiding his traces. His capture came in 1934, when a detective, William King, traced the Budd letters stationery to a Manhattan flophouse. Picture a dimly lit room, its air stale with tobacco, where Fish was arrested. His frail frame no match for the weight of his crimes. His trial in 1935 was a sensation. The courtroom packed with reporters, the air thick with ink and polished wood. Fish confessed, his voice soft, claiming insanity driven by divine commands. Psychiatrists testified to his warped psyche, noting his obsession with pain and religion, but the jury rejected his plea. On January 16, 1936, he was executed in Sing Sing's electric chair. His final words calm, almost detached, as reported by the New York Post. The city exhaled, but the scars of his crimes lingered. Fish's life was a descent into darkness, a man who thrived in the cracks of a city too busy to notice. His story, whispered in tenements and printed in newsprint, is a reminder of the horrors that can hide behind a quiet smile, a legacy that haunts New York's memory. The Budd case was Fish's most infamous crime, but other mysteries swirled in his orbit. Let's turn to the unsolved disappearances of 1920s New York, where shadows swallowed the vulnerable, leaving questions that echo still. Picture yourself standing on a bustling Manhattan street in 1928, where the air hums with the clatter of elevated trains and the sharp scent of roasted peanuts from corner vendors. The city is a whirlwind of motion flappers and beaded dresses hurried to jazz clubs, while newsboys shout headlines about Prohibition raids and Charles Lindbergh's fame. But beneath New York's vibrant pulse lies a quieter dread, a shadow cast by missing children and unanswered questions. The kidnapping of Grace Budd, a 10-year-old girl taken by Albert Fish, is the most infamous of these mysteries, but it's not the only one. Dozens of others vanished in the 1920s, their fates lost in the city's chaos, leaving families grasping at fading hopes. Let's walk through this enigma, tracing the threads of Grace's case and the broader web of disappearances. It's told with a gentle cadence to keep you tethered as you drift toward rest. New York in 1928 was a city of 7 million, streets a maze of tenements, skyscrapers, and speakeasies. The Budd family lived in a modest apartment on West 15th Street, its walls papered in peeling florals, the air heavy with the smell of boiled potatoes and coal dust. Picture Grace, a bright-eyed girl with a quick laugh, playing with dolls in a cramped living room. On May 28, 1928, Albert Fish, posing as Frank Howard, a kindly farmer, visited the Budds after answering their newspaper ads seeking work for Grace's older brother, Edward. Fish, with his gray hair and soft voice, seemed harmless, offering a job on his fictional Long Island farm. He charmed the family, sharing tea at their table, his eyes lingering on Grace. Days later, he returned, convincing her parents to let her attend a niece's birthday party in Brooklyn. Grace, in her Sunday dress, took his hand and left, her footsteps fading down the tenement stairs. She never returned. The Buds' grief filled their home, their voices breaking as they reported her missing. The police stretched thin with only 20,000 officers for the city. As noted in the New York Times, prioritized gang violence over missing children from working-class families. Picture a precinct house, its air thick with cigarette smoke and the clack of typewriters, where Grace's case was logged as one of dozens. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, but clues were scarce. A vague sighting of a girl with an old man, a discarded candy wrapper near a subway stop. The New York Daily News ran brief stories, but public attention was fleeting, drawn to Al Smith's presidential run or the Yankees' latest win. For 6 years, the case languished. The Buds' apartment, a shrine of untouched toys and fading hope. In 1934, a breakthrough came when Fish sent a letter to the Buds, intercepted by police. Written in his shaky hand, it described Grace's fate in veiled terms, confirming her death without graphic detail. The New York Post called it a confession of unspeakable cruelty, its cold precision chilling readers. Detective William King traced the letter's stationery to a Manhattan flophouse, leading to Fish's arrest. His confession linked him to Grace and others Billy Gaffney, vanished in 1927, and Francis McDonnell, taken in 1924, but he hinted at more unnamed victims. Court records, as reported in the Brooklyn Eagle, suggested he was tied to at least 15 disappearances, though the true number may be higher, as poor neighborhoods like Hell's Kitchen or the Lower East Side rarely reported missing children. Beyond Grace, the 1920s saw a wave of vanishings that baffled police. Picture a boy 9, last seen buying bread on Delancey Street, his cap found in a vacant lot. Or a girl, 12, who didn't return from a Coney Island outing, her scarf snagged on a pier. The New York World in 1929 reported a spike in missing children. With 1,200 cases annually, many unresolved. Some were runaways, escaping crowded tenements or abusive homes, but others suggested predation. Fish's confessions fueled speculation. Did he act alone, or were others involved? His travels as a painter took him to 23 states, as he claimed in court, leaving a trail of missing children in cities like Philadelphia and Boston. Yet, evidence was thin, often just a name in a police ledger or a family's plea in a newspaper. The city's subculture of drifters and transients complicated investigations. Picture a Bowery flophouse, its air stale with tobacco and sweat, where men like Fish blended in, their aliases scrawled on tattered registers. These wanderers and employed laborers, conmen, or vagrants moved through New York's underbelly, living in 25-cent rooms or shanties along the East River. They were invisible to authorities, their disappearances rarely noticed. Police failures were stark. Understaffed precincts, no centralized missing persons unit, and a focus on prohibition enforcement left cases cold. The New York Herald Tribune in 1930 criticized the NYPD's indifference to missing children, noting that detectives often assumed victims had run off rather than pursuing leads. Families like the Buds faced bureaucratic walls, their letters to police unanswered, their searches fruitless. Other factors muddied the waters. Accidents where common children drowned in the Hudson, were struck by streetcars, or succumbed to diseases like tuberculosis in airless tenements. Some missing were misidentified bodies in the city morgue, as the New York Sun reported in 1928. With over 1,000 unidentified dead annually, predators beyond Fish likely operated transient workers, gang members, or opportunistic criminals staking advantage of the city's chaos. Rumors of child snatchers circulated, fueled by sensational papers, but evidence was scarce. Fish's confessions, riddled with lies, muddled the truth, as he claimed divine guidance or exaggerated his crimes to cement his infamy. As you imagine yourself walking New York's streets, the gas lamps casting long shadows, you feel the weight of these mysteries. Grace Budd's face, smiling in a faded photo, haunts her family's tenement, joined by countless others whose names are lost. Were they victims of Fish, other predators, or the city's relentless grind? The questions linger, like the damp chill of a New York evening, unanswered but heavy with possibility. The 1920s were a time of progress and peril, where innocence could vanish in a heartbeat. Fish's solitary horrors were one face of New York's underworld, but another thrived in the open, lavish, organized, and untouchable. Let's turn to the elite criminals of Prohibition, the bootleggers, who ruled the city's shadows with whiskey and wealth. Now, imagine yourself stepping away from the chilling shadows of Albert Fish's tenements and into a different corner of 1920s New York, where the air hums with the clink of glasses and the low hum of jazz. The city is a kaleidoscope of light and sound, neon signs flicker above speakeasies, and the scent of illicit whiskey mingles with perfume in crowded dance halls. Prohibition, enacted in 1920, has outlawed alcohol, but it's also birthed a glittering underworld of bootleggers. Men and women who turned New York's thirst into empires of wealth. Unlike Fish's solitary horrors, these criminals operated in organized networks. Their lavish lifestyle is a stark contrast to the struggles of the city's working class. Picture a hidden club in Greenwich Village, its velvet curtains drawn, the air thick with cigar smoke, and the tang of smuggled rum. Let's walk through their world, where cunning was currency, and every deal was a dance with danger. It's told with a gentle cadence to ease you toward rest. New York in the 1920s was a city of 7 million. Its skyline soaring with new skyscrapers like the Chrysler Building, still under construction, while its streets teemed with Model Ts and horse carts. Prohibition meant to curb vice. Instead, fueled a black market that poured millions into criminal hands. Bootleggers were the era's elite criminals, their operations as sophisticated as any corporation. Picture the 5 Points Gang, reborn from its 19th century roots, a powerhouse in Manhattan's Lower East Side, led by figures like Frankie Yale and Johnny Torrio. They controlled rum-running routes from Canada to the Caribbean, their trucks rumbling through the night loaded with crates of Canadian club whiskey or Jamaican rum. The New York Times in 1927 estimated that bootlegging generated $500 million annually in New York alone, dwarfing legitimate industries. These operations were intricate. Picture a Brooklyn warehouse, its air heavy with the scent of oak barrels and motor oil, where workers repackaged smuggled liquor into bottles labeled medicinal tonic to skirt the law. Bootleggers bribed police and politicians, ensuring raids were tipped off or evidence lost. The New York Herald Tribune reported in 1925 that over 1,000 speakeasies operated in Manhattan, each a front for gangs like the 5 Points or the Brooklyn-based Shapiro brothers. They used coded language whiskey, was T, a smuggler, a delivery man, and relied on networks of runners, lookouts, and accountants. Women played key roles, like Texas Gwinon, a former actress who ran speakeasies, her charm disarming patrons and cops alike. Picture her in a sequined dress, her laugh ringing through a midtown club as she pours illegal gin, her profits funding a penthouse apartment. Bootleggers lived like royalty. Imagine a townhouse on Riverside Drive, its rooms adorned with Persian rugs, mahogany furniture, and the faint scent of lavender polish. They dined at the Cotton Club, where Duke Ellington's band played, their tables laden with lobster and champagne smuggled from France. Their Karspackards, or Duesenbergs, gleamed under streetlights, driven by chauffeurs past tenements where families shared single rooms. Frankie Yale, a 5 Points leader, owned a Brooklyn mansion and a cigar shop as a front, his wealth rivaling Wall Street bankers. The New York World in 1928 described his funeral after a gangland hit as a spectacle, with 38 cars of flowers and a $15,000 casket. Yet, their lives were precarious. Betrayal or a rival's bullet could end it all. Yale's 1928 murder, sprayed by machine gun fire, was a reminder of the stakes. Contrast this with New York's working class. Picture a factory worker in the garment district, his hands calloused from 12-hour shifts, earning $20 a week. His tenement in Hell's Kitchen smells of damp plaster and cabbage, his family of 6 sharing 2 rooms with a shared hallway toilet. Or a laundress, her arms red from lye, washing linens for 10 cents an hour, her fingers aching as she dreams of a night at the movies. These were the city's backbone, their wages barely covering rent $10 a month for a cold water flatter food, like bread and canned beans. The New York Sun in 1926 noted that 40% of New Yorkers live below the poverty line, their lives a quiet struggle against the city's grind. Bootleggers preyed on their hopes, selling watered-down liquor in backroom bars or extorting shopkeepers for protection. A speakeasie's $1 drink was a day's wage for many, a luxury they couldn't afford. Bootlegging wasn't just about liquor, this was power. Gangs controlled neighborhoods, their influence reaching City Hall. The 5 Points Gang, with ties to future mafia bosses like Lucky Luciano, ran numbers, rackets, and loan sharking alongside rum. They clashed with rivals like the Irish White Hand Gang, their turf wars leaving bodies in alleys. As the Brooklyn Eagle reported in 1924, police where complicit officers took $50 bribes to ignore shipments, per the New York Post. Federal agents, underfunded with only 1,500 nationwide, seized 10% of smuggled liquor, leaving bootleggers free to thrive. Smuggling routes were vast. Ships from Nassau docked at Long Island's Montauk Point. Their cargo unloaded under moonlight, while trucks crossed the Canadian border near Buffalo. As detailed in Prohibition, 13 years that changed America. The law's hypocrisy fueled their success. Politicians drank in the same speakeasies they vowed to shut down. Society's elite bankers, actors flocked to their clubs. Picture a Harlem speakeasy, its air thick with cigarette smoke and the wail of a saxophone, where a Wall Street broker toasts a gang leader. Bootleggers like Bill Dwyer, dubbed the king of rum runners, owned fleets of boats and warehouses, his $40 million fortune rivaling industrialists. It risks loomed raids, betrayals, or rival gangs. Dwyer's 1925 arrest, as reported by the New York Times, led to a year in prison. But he emerged richer, his network intact. Contrast this with the daily lives of those like the Budd family, whose loss of grace was compounded by poverty. Picture their apartment, its air heavy with grief, their $12 weekly income barely covering rent. Bootleggers' wealth mocked their struggle. Speakeasies a world apart from the tenements where families mourned or labored. The 1920s were a gilded age for some, a grind for others, and bootleggers thrived in the gap. Their empires built on New York's thirst and desperation. As you imagine leaving their hidden clubs, the city's lights fading into the night, you feel the weight of this divided world. The bootleggers' opulence, built on cunning and corruption, stood in stark relief to the quiet struggles of those they exploited. A reminder that in 1920s New York, wealth and power often came at a cost paid by others. Step back now from the frenetic pulse of 1920s New York. Its streets fading into the quiet of memory, like a photograph yellowing at the edges. You've walked the shadowed halls of a Brooklyn tenement, felt the creeping dread of living near Albert Fish, traced the chilling arc of his monstrous crimes, pondered the haunting mysteries of Grace, Bud, and other lost souls, and glimpsed the gilded world of Prohibition's bootleggers. New York was a city of dazzling contrasts, its jazz-filled nights and speakeasy glamour masking a darker undercurrent where innocence could vanish and trust could turn to betrayal. The air, thick with the scents of whiskey, coal smoke, and the faint briny temps of the East River, carried the stories of those who chased dreams and those who preyed upon them. Each life a thread in a tapestry woven from ambition, despair, and resilience. Picture yourself now standing on the Brooklyn waterfront. The city's skyline, a jagged silhouette against the twilight sky. The gentle lap of waves against the docks, a soothing counterpoint to the urban clamor. The tenements where fish lurked are silent now, their secrets locked in time. The speakeasies, once alive with laughter and clinking glasses, have shuttered. Their bootleggers' empires reduced to whispers in history's pages, Grace Budd's name and those of countless others who vanished. Lingers in fading newspaper clippings, their unresolved fates, a quiet ache in the city's memory. The 1920s were a time of progress and peril, where the promise of a new era stood side by side with the shadows of those who exploited it. Reflect, if you wish, on the distance between that world and your own. The dangers of Fish's New York, the grief of families like the Budds, the glittering deceit of the bootleggers they feel far removed, softened by the passage of years. Yet they remind us of the fragility of trust, the strength it takes to navigate uncertainty, and the quiet endurance of those who lived through such times. The neighbor who avoided Fish's gaze, the families who searched for their lost, The workers who toiled while bootleggers prospered, they carried on. Their lives a testament to resilience in the face of a city that could be both wondrous and cruel. As you rest tonight, imagine leaving New York's gaslit streets behind, stepping into the comfort of the present, where the air is calm and the night is still. The rhythm of those lives, fraught with fear and ambition, has faded, replaced by the gentle cadence of your own breath, steady and sure. The past is a story told, its lessons tucked safely into memory, like a book closed on a shelf. Let the shadows of 1920s New York drift away, carried by the slow current of time as you sink into the warmth of this moment. Sleep deeply, knowing you're far from the tenements and speakeasies, safe in the quiet embrace of tonight.